House Republicans highlighting an explosive new batch of Hunter Biden WhatsApp messages dating back to 2017. The president's son demanding millions in a potential deal with the Chinese energy company, claiming the Bidens were best at doing exactly what the company's chairman wants. Let's bring in Ben Domenech, the Spectator editor-at-large and Fox News contributor. Ben, there's this one WhatsApp message, and we've seen a couple of these now. This one is to this Chinese energy company's associate, Gongwen Dong, a.k.a. Kevin here. And he says, I'm tired of this, Kevin. This is allegedly Hunter. I can make $5 million in salary from any law firm in America. If you think it's about money, it's not. The Bidens are the best at doing exactly what chairman wants from this partnership. Please let's not quibble over peanuts. And we have the IRS whistleblower, Gary Shapley, on tonight, who says that all of their investigative efforts were thwarted to go down this particular road.
You know, the plural there is doing a lot of work. The Bidens, plural, not just Hunter himself. He says, I can make $5 million from any legal firm in the country. I'm not sure how many of those would actually have hired him. I think he might have been having that work instead if he was not in the desperate situation that he was. And I think that plural question really is the one that the forces, the powers that be at the DOJ and elsewise were really trying to prevent any of these investigators from getting into. They didn't want them to ask about Joe Biden. They didn't want them to in any way search the guest house or do any of the other things that they said would be embarrassing for the president or the former vice president at various points. And I think that's the part of this that is so telling. We really are meant to be to take away from this that Hunter was sort of operating on his own, that he was trying to sell people on things that he couldn't deliver. But the real questions that I think have to be raised are, did he deliver? Did he actually deliver things to these various foreign entities that would have been completely unethical and inappropriate to allow any kind of son of a vice president or a president of the United States to promise to particularly America's adversaries? And that's the kind of question that Republicans in Congress and other investigators need to dig into.
Well, this investigator, a supervising investigator, IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley, saying that there are a lot of roads to go down here that they were not able to go down. However, there were specifics on what Hunter Biden owed the government based on his taxes. And take a listen to this.
There's still, outstanding tax due and owing above that $620,000 that, because of this deal, they'll never recoup. The most substantive felony charges were left off the table.
Which would have been what?
Which would have been evasion for 14, false return for 18 and 2019.
There's a long list here, and the interview is really detailed, Ben, but we often play the game, look through the prism of what happens if this was President Trump's family and these investigators or whistleblowers were coming forward. It's not a game, but I mean, it's worth thinking about.
I can't believe for 1 second that Eric Trump, Don Jr., Ivanka, anyone else who was the son or daughter of the former president, if they had this type of evidence pile against them, that we would see anything like the way that the legacy media has really until this past week tried to sweep this story under the rug, pretend that it doesn't exist. Instead, what we have here, I think, is a fact set that clearly deserves to be investigated, deserves to be looked into, and you have the additional aspect of, frankly, Merrick Garland's promise before the United States Congress that he would not in any way interfere, that Mr. Weiss would have total authority when it came to what was done with this case. And I think that we now know, or we have a preponderance of evidence to suggest that was not the case. And that, in fact, whether they were being directed from on high or whether they were simply acting in partisan interest, this was a case that they wanted to go away. They didn't want to have any questions asked about any kind of connection to Hunter Biden's father. and to certainly any decisions that he might have made that could have been influenced by this money.
Yeah. Ben, as always, thank you. Sandra, that interview tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern time, and we get right to that question about the Attorney General, what he said about overseeing this, and this whistleblower, who's, a career worker inside, a supervisor inside the IRS, who is being pretty brave, coming out saying everything he's saying.
Sounds like a fantastic interview and very newsy, of course. We'll be watching that 6 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Brett, we should be learning a whole lot more. People have major questions over whether there's a double standard or if there is fairness or unfairness at play. So we'll be listening, Brett. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.